This is another do-it-yourself video brought to you by DIY Guy 123, and I'm going to start off this video by saying shame on you, Toyota, shame on you for building a car that is otherwise a great car. But you're going to see in this video how ridiculous this is that Toyota did this terrible thing to the Toyota owners. We've got a 2010 Toyota Venza, and belongs to somebody I know, and they said my windshield wipers don't work anymore. I don't know why. They just don't turn on the window and don't move in the window. Well, when we took the little plastic covering off that covers up the windshield wiper motor and all the linkage, also known as a wiper transmission, it normally looks like this, but what we found is this right here. So this here's the motor which turns this shaft, which turns this little ball around and around and around like that. And that little ball moves this thing around like this. And this end of the linkage goes on this ball and moves this back and forth. So this whole thing moves back and forth. And it causes the wipers here and here to sweep back and forth. Well, this guy right here had popped right off both ends, and that one had popped off under there. I just snapped it back on, but that one popped off. So why is that? Well, it's because there are these little neoprene or some kind of plasticky bushings at the end here, and other cars, other manufacturers make them replaceable. In fact, I bought this kit from the auto parts store for $4.90 Canadian, and it had like 10 different, there are 10 wiper bushings, various sizes and styles and clips and so on, and I was hoping that I'd get lucky and find one that fits in the end of this arm. No luck. They didn't fit, and in fact these bushings are not designed to be replaced. They're in fact designed the opposite, they're molded in place, which is annoying because this bar will never wear out. But these bushings do wear out. So then I did a lot of research on the web. You can't find bushings for this Toyota Venza. So I saw a video on YouTube where somebody took some what they called thermoplastic, which I only assume that means plastic that gets really soft when warmed and then gets hard when it's cold. And they put a blob of it in there in the female part of the socket, and then they pushed it on the male part of the socket quickly, and then kind of smushed it around the bottom of the ball to make like a socket that really, the female part really gripped on the male part. So I tried that by heating this up with a heat gun, getting the plastic liquid, tried all that, waste of time. Didn't work for me. Worked for the other guy, good for him, but didn't work for me. I guess I didn't have the technique. So then I tried just melting the bushing itself and putting it over the socket and kind of smushing the ends of it so that it gripped the ball a bit better. Didn't work. So I finally called the Toyota dealer. By the way, I couldn't get this wiper motor transmission aftermarket anywhere. Called a junkyard. They'd sell me one for 130 bucks. When I agreed to get it, they checked it and it was worn out and not worth selling. So I had no options but to go to the dealer and buy this. And I will say the fellow on the phone was very nice and he did his best to help me. He just, was limited by what parts are in his system. This right here was $300 plus tax for this little stuff in my hands. $300 plus tax. So, okay, we accepted that. But upon further inspection, I noticed that the balls right here and here, well, they're corroded. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but let's see if I can get a better... See there? Look at that. It's all corroded, not near the top, but on kind of like the inner surface. All of that is rust and rough. And of course, that is what chewed out the neoprene. And on further inspection, there should have been a little rubber washer, not a washer, but a little seal there that kept the grease in. Well, on the ones where this had popped off and the bushings had worn out, that little seal was nowhere to be found. So my guess is the seal failed, the grease leaked out, water or a speck of dirt or whatever got in there, scraped the chrome on the ball, caused pitting, and that caused very accelerated wear on the plastic bushing. Unimpressed. Well, when I inquired about the wiper linkage, I said, look, the ball right here on the motor lever, or whatever you call that thing, it is slightly tarnished as well. So I said I'm going to pay $300 for this brand new wiper linkage, and this ball right here has to, or the female socket has to go on the male part of the socket, and it's going to have accelerated wear. And he said, well, I don't know, maybe you could buff out the rust or something. Well, I've been at it with some emery cloth, and I've got it decent, but you know where that chrome is destroyed. You know, it's gone through the chrome, and I've got it smooth now to touch pretty well, but that is going to rust very quickly if the grease ever leaks out. So options are, I thought maybe I could install a grease nipple right there, also known as a Zerk fitting, and every 6 months put a little shot of grease to that to keep it lubricated. But still, and that'll be good, but it's still going to wear excessively fast because of the pitting. So what I'm going to try to do, oh, and this part right here, this little part of my finger won't come separate. Toyota only sells this and this together, $330 more plus tax. I stumbled saying it, it's so much money. I don't know why the parts that bolt, like they come apart, parts that you can unbolt from another part, why you can't buy it separate. But in this case, this only comes with that. And all I really need is this. So Toyota engineers, if you're watching, that should be replaceable, and so should that. And they should be about $7 or $10 to buy all the little steel balls and the plastic bushings. So now that I'm done complaining, I'm going to get on to, and sufficiently shame Toyota, I'm going to get on to how I'm going to deal with this and not put this car back together and very quickly ruin my brand new bushings. I'm going to take one of the known good balls from the old transmission and grind it from the back. It's crimped on there. Grind it from the back and knock it out. And now I'll just have the ball. And then I'm going to do the same for this. Oh, and by the way, it's got to be a good one. I'll check to make sure it's pristine. Then I'll grind this one, grind the back of it where it's crimped on, knock it out, put the new one in, and I'll put a dot of weld on the back end of that to hold it in place, and that should take care of it. Now, of course, I am going to remove this lever from the motor and do this all in a vise so I get really good access to it and can turn it over and do a nice weld on it. But before you disconnect it, you want to mark it. So I've put a mark on the shaft, on the nut, which doesn't really matter because that nut just has to be tight, on the lever, the end right there, and on the motor housing here. So when I go to put it back on, I'm going to put it on exactly the way it was. My assumption is that shaft has teeth on it that grip into this, and I definitely want that aligned, because if not, your wipers will stop in the wrong place on your windshield when you need to turn them off. Okay, so after popping off one of these little sockets that appeared to be quite tight, I was left with a very shiny, nice chrome ball. So I knew that was going to be okay. And also, this rubber gasket was in place, or the seal. And you know what? There was grease on it when I took it out. So that just proves that if you can keep the grease in, the parts don't wear out. So again, maybe a grease fitting on those wouldn't be a bad idea. Then it turns into a maintenance item and probably nobody would do it. Okay, so what I did was I ground, let's say this is the head of the kind of crimped part. I ground all around the perimeter, but I didn't grind on the top of that, like in the center. I ground all the way around the perimeter and not on the center. And so what I've got, it protrudes just ever so slightly. See that little layer, or that little gap between this part and my vice jaws? Well, the little part right there, that's the end of it sticking out. You can see it shiny. And I've got a 5/8 socket that goes over top of the ball. So the ball is inside the socket. And I'm going to crank on this vise, and my hope is I just hear a pop. Oh, well, there's no pop, but I just pushed it through. It didn't take much effort. Here, look at this. Look at this. Almost like we know what we're doing. Almost. So, okay, so here's the ball. It's in perfect condition. I can feel nothing around it. I looked. It's absolutely perfect. And here's the back. Here's the back of that where it was crimped. I ground all around the perimeter. It really didn't take much. I probably ground even more than I needed to, but you don't need to do much. Just a little bit around the perimeter, and then it'll poke through. And so I'm not sure if you can see it, but it started to kind of raise away there. So I'm just going to drive it out the rest of the way. And then I'll have my new ball, or my good ball, to put into the new wiper transmission. Imagine how frustrated you'd be if you paid $300 plus tax for a wiper transmission, and then a year later you've worn it out again because of this part that you didn't notice this part was faulty. Anyway, well, recycled ball that's in perfect shape, and I didn't really damage the bottom of that at all. So I'm going to do the same thing on the little wiper arm that's on the motor, install my new one, we'll be good to go. So folks, that was a 12 millimeter nut on there. So I took the nut off, and there isn't any washer or anything, it's just a lock nut. And to get this little lever here off of the motor shaft, you don't want to just pry on it and see what happens. Like, you know, you could just do this and see what happens. Well, what I did, I just put a little bit of tension here, and then I tapped down on the top of the shaft. I guess if I was going to tap any amount at all, I would have put the nut back on so the threads don't mushroom. It's probably good practice. I didn't do it because I just barely touched it, and the lever came off. So here it is, and I'm going to replace that corroded ball right there with the good ball. And so, of course, to get this one out, I got to grind the edges. So, take a little paper to protect that ball right there, and I'll drive it in. I will have to put that socket behind it because I've bottomed out the back end, which is okay. Very important, don't scrape that chrome ball. Oh, that's perfect. It's almost like we know what we're doing. Oh, that's so perfect in there. Now, so there's my perfect ball back in there. It's pressed in, it's probably never going to come out, but just to make sure, I'm going to weld up on that and just fill that in with a bit of weld so that's really never coming out. Okay, we're going to start in the center, just put a little pool of weld on there, a little puddle, just to build that up and lock it in place. Don't need to penetrate too much on that shaft, or that, whatever this lever right here. Just make the ball enough so that the ball of weld enough so that the actual chrome ball doesn't pull through. Chrome, it may or may not, but certainly causing the grease that was inside that ball to drip out because the ball has kind of like a hollow top on it. That's okay. So we're just going to let that cool down for a minute because I'm doing so well here. I don't want to get excited and get ahead of myself. While we're waiting, here's the old ball, and you can see the corrosion on it. Installed, not damaged, and there's a ugly, I know all you welders would be ashamed of me, but anyway, it's on there now and it's not coming off. That weld bead is going to be good. So now I'll reinstall this in the motor and then I'll go on to the next step. Okay, so I put the new there's the new ball right there on the existing lever. Put it back on, put the nut back on. I actually tightened the nut until it was tight. And then, in fact, the little black ink mark I made on the nut lined right up. So I knew everything was okay. This had pushed down in the shaft just as much. And in fact, I realized that you may say, hey, this doesn't line up with that black ink mark. It did. And in the process of tightening this down, I rotated the motor. So it's okay. So now, let's make sure that we put this guy back on. Okay, so we're going to put him on so that the new bushing lasts as long as it should. And hopefully I don't split that getting it on. Okay, there it is, good. And I'm going to plug that right full of white grease because that's the grease that was in it. Okay, so here I am. I've put the motor on the new wiper transmission. It's really 2 Torx bolts that go in there. You don't want to tighten them down too much because if you split this right here, like this nut, if it gets too much rotation or too much torque on the nut, If you put too much torque in the nut because of that bolt, it could split this, and then you're into a whole other problem of trying to weld that up. Don't do it. So look, this is not the time to be sparing with grease. You've seen what happens when the grease goes away. I definitely have my seal on there, and I've got grease around the bottom of the seal and inside the ball, because there is like a hollow part in the ball, I don't know why. And then in the female part, I've got it greased up too. That's wheel bearing grease. So gently see if you can, see if I can do this, see what happens here. Kind of give it some, look at that. I just kind of wiggled the pliers back and forth a little bit like this while I was doing it. It's hard to see, but I was. And it just kind of sat on there. And now, watch what happens when I roll this guy around. It's definitely on the socket. And of course the grease did smear out, so I'll just take the excess and throw it away. And that wiper transmission has been fully rebuilt. So we're going to reassemble this wiper motor transmission back into the car here, and I'd already taken it out. It took some time to get the parts, so I put this shroud back on temporarily while the car was being driven around. But anyway, so I need to take the shroud off. There was a little plastic nut here on that stud and here as well, so you take those off, and then there are plastic clips along the front that I'll just zoom in on one and show you there. So anyway, there's another one. There's another one. There's a couple of different styles of these things. So right here in this little cover, there was a rubber, see that rubber clip right there? Anyway, that was in there. So as soon as you do that, this business swings down. So I'm going to undo that rubber clip on both sides. Alright, hopefully that'll come right out. There. So it's kind of a funny design. Here there's a metal shroud that's like a drip thing that keeps water from going down in this bearing. It collects there and runs out. Here's a plastic one. Anyway, the new one looked the same as the old one. I don't know why they're that way, but that's the way they are. That was in backwards. That's no good. So this tucks under. Like, I gotta hold your mouth the right way. It's not too bad. Oh yeah, okay. And if you look right here, see that little guy right there? That is part of this. That has to go inside there, like that. Okay. It's got to fit in like a little track right here, and it can only go on one way, and it goes on until you hear snap. That's good. And now that rubber guy fit in there, and that keeps the motor stable. And then these holes line up with where they're supposed to be. And that hole lines up. So we're gonna bolt that all down. So here we are. We've got this bolt tight and these two bolts tight, and I've just turned it on before I put the shroud on to just make sure it works, which it does, and also just show you how it works. I mean, it's quite a complicated linkage. So this kind of linkage is required if you want to have one motor to do two wipers, and if you want that motor to only go in one direction. You don't want the motor to reverse. And that's exactly what we have here. So now I'll put that plastic shroud back on, and then I'll go ahead and put the wipers on. So that's it for now. So we're all buttoned up here on the top. So we've got the shroud back in, and remember there were clips that go underneath the windshield. So you kind of just place it there, wiggle this back and forth to seat all those clips that go under the window. And then on this part, there's a little rubber thing that goes into the hole, a little stud that goes into the hole. Same thing on the other side. I've got it done over there. And kind of just shake this around so that it fits in there. You know, it's not bound up or pinched anywhere. And then put the nut on right here. There's one here and one on the other side. So that's all you're going to do. Switch the wiper switch off in the car. Let the motor finish wherever it was rotating until it comes to a stop. Don't just turn the key off, because if you turn the key off, these studs could be in any position, and when you assemble your wipers and you reassemble it like that, thinking, oh, there you go, that's the way they'll be when they're off, when you turn the wiper back on, that motor may try and drive that wiper down like this and strip the shaft or break your new transmission or break your wipers off, or it's all kinds of bad stuff. So make sure you turn the switch off, and these studs will end up in their natural resting or off position. So we've done that. Then to get this wiper arm back on there, shouldn't be too bad. It is spring loaded. Okay, and I can feel teeth that were kind of already in that the shaft has teeth on it, and I can feel kind of like a natural like spot where teeth were right there, and that's where I want the wiper to come to a stop anyway. So I'm gonna put this nut on by hand, and of course tighten it up with a wrench, and do the same to the other side. Oh, that's falling down. That's no good. No, see, that's too low. Maybe that's supposed to be. Maybe that's supposed to be way down there. Seem to. There, we'll try that. This down tight. Turn the wiper on. If it comes all the way up to this, if it comes all the way up to here, like basically to right here, then I'll know it's in the right place. If it only comes to there, you know, for example, then I'll know I have to change the angle of that wiper. Okay, so what we got here, the wipers all back on. I did adjust them, each of them adjust them a couple of different ways. You notice the driver's side wiper comes all the way up right to the edge of the window, which is fine. I wondered if it was actually going just slightly too far because it went into this black part, but that's okay. But I was thinking, hey, if it is going too far, I could actually have it go further down this way and be less in, you know, it would be more out of sight for the driver when the driver's driving. But when I put this down here, the wiper didn't go up far enough. So that's the proper position for this wiper. That wiper over there on the passenger side, it's going up quite far to here, so it doesn't need to go any further this way, and it disappears as far as I can get it down out of sight there. So these are now adjusted properly. And the only thing that I didn't show you was after I tighten these nuts, I don't know a torque for these nuts, but you don't want to strip them for sure. I put these little caps back on that cover the nuts. Put the hood down and you've done your job. So there you have it. Good luck with your do-it-yourself video.